that there is two different types when we talk about this, and people confuse them. There's a ready position, which means prepared to act, and then there's what I call a preparatory position, which means to make ready. And a lot of people are confusing the two. As you guys are going to see when we get on the range, I'm going to teach you an arc of ready, because no single ready position will work for all situations. You have to adapt to the situation. So thinking you'll always be in a guard position, or you'll always be in a high ready, or you'll always be in an air marshal or chest ready position, you can't do it. You've got to be able to adapt. So we're going to talk about an arc of ready, but where much of the controversy comes these days actually comes from what I call preparatory positions. And the classic one is position Sewell. If you ever take the time to look at Max Joseph's video on YouTube, you'll see that he never intended position Sewell to be a ready position. It was a very task-specific position intended for a certain thing. And because it was original, it truly was new, many instructors took off with it, using it for situations that it did not intend to be used. Okay? So when I see people in position Sewell, especially when it's up here on their chest, first of all, I'm telling them they're doing it wrong. Because if you look at Mr. Joseph's video, it's down on your abdomen, so you're not sticking your elbows out so far. It's down here like this, it's not up here like this. And then the next thing I always ask people is I say, okay, why do you have that gun in that position? Well, I'm keeping the muzzle safe. All right, fire around. What do you mean? Well, if you're putting it in that position, fire around. Or what if somebody grabs a hold of your muzzle and strips it from you? Well, I'll do this. Okay, now fire around again. If you get them to fire around, you'll start seeing them doing things like this. See what I'm saying? Boom! Okay? If you fire around in position Sewell, it'll land about 1 foot in front of your feet. That's not hard to believe, right? But is that good when suddenly your legs are moving? You're running with it. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking if I shot myself in the femoral artery, that it would hurt, it would be relatively fatal. How fast, Chris?
You can empty in about a minute.
A minute. So if you haven't got a tourniquet right there with you in the middle of your gunfight while you're running, you're toast. Anybody seen that episode with Larry Vickers' television show, the Spetsnaz guys? The guy was holding it in a pseudo Sewell, and they're punching him, and boom, he fires around right down between his feet. Just made my manhood want to crawl right up inside my body. The reason for that is it's pointed down between your feet. Look, I understand being safe, but of all of the people in the world that you do not want to inadvertently, accidentally, or negligently shoot, you are number one. If it's between me and Gary, we're in tight spaces right here, and I've got a chance to either shoot myself in the foot or Gary in the foot, sorry to hear about your luck. I mean, does that surprise anybody? It's the reason that I tend to bring my gun around in my preparatory position. I bring it around to the side of my rib cage, right here like this. Why do I do that? Because I don't have to teach you something new. Why is that?
It's part of the draw.
All it is part of the draw stroke. It's like mid-draw. It also allows me to have my hand up here ready to fight. When I'm here like this, what's my fending hand doing? My law enforcement experience has shown me that this hand comes in handy for a lot of things, and the idea of having it trapped underneath my body for weapon safety purposes, I can't get my head wrapped around it. And then to do this, or, see what I'm saying? Now I've got to artificially flag, I can't wrap my head around it. If you like position Sewell, you use position Sewell safely, I won't correct you. I don't teach it. I teach it right here like this. If I fire off a round, and I'm willing to do it for you later on, no problem, it's going to be just about 2.5 to 3 feet in front of me. Boom, right there like that. Well, you know what? I can run with that gun in that position, and I'm not going to shoot myself in the knee or the leg. So I like it for that. If I'm in a fight situation and I turn around like this and it's not a gun situation, watch this. This is a pretty neat technique. I can put the gun away in the holster and fight. Or if it is a gun situation, all I've got to do is complete my draw stroke. So it's something you're already doing. It adds continuity of action while keeping the gun safe, and I can use it to fight with. Or put it away. So it's real simple and easy. I'm not going to shoot myself with it. And I really don't understand the resistance to using it, other than it doesn't look as cool. You guys know, don't look at me like that, man. Okay, give me that stink eye. You know, I'm busting your chops. I really don't care how cool it looks. I want it to be effective, and I just find this to be as effective as it can be. Or I could get into a weapon retention, actually a speed rock, but it's real easy to do, and I know where the muzzle's going to be all the time. I can run with it. I can do all kinds of stuff. Matter of fact, you'll see later when we start doing turning and running, this is where I'll put my gun because I've got it locked in against my torso, and I can run with it versus this. Now, the new latest flavor is what's called the Temple Index. And that came up a few weeks ago. I think there's a book right in behind you guys, a Masada U book. You guys see it laying in there? You find it? You may have to roll it back. Thank you. Bring that here. I was looking through this. If you want to learn something new, read an old book. And I do this. And Moss is a friend of mine. And I was reading this, the Semi-Automatic in Police Service and Self-Defense. And I knew I had seen this position before. And I'm going to show it to our camera guy first, and then I'll pass it around. You guys will notice that it's a picture of Moss with his gun up next to his head. This picture was actually taken at the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy in London. We were taught this as the tactical high ready. So the idea of having your gun here is it's not new, it's not original. All right, understand that first. The reason it fell out of favor is because we found guys using it on the street and they'd be looking around corners and doing stuff like this. You remember that, Joe? You remember it? Yeah. Joe's been around long enough to remember it. And we were like, oh, that's not a good idea. Okay? Well, what is now called the Temple Index is becoming increasingly popular, but like Sewell, it's being used inappropriately. Now, a couple of weeks ago in Millersburg, we had an instructor in the class from the Department of Defense. Nice guy, super guy, great instructor. He really gave us a lot of information. But we were doing the check 360 drill where you actually bring the gun down and you turn and you look around. Some of you have been in my class before, know what I'm talking about. Well, what this instructor was doing is he was bringing the gun back in here like this with the hand up, and he would turn and he would look. And of course, some of the people in the class were like, ooh, that's new. What's he doing? So what I knew about it was only what I had seen on the internet. So why should I try to explain something I really don't comprehend? So at the beginning of day 2, we asked him to step forward and explain to the class what he was doing. And he said, first of all, he had never, the Temple Index name came off the internet. Within their community, within their training arena, they just call it a high or a gun high position. That's all they called it. Also keep in mind, he's doing a lot of training for PSDs, protective security details, dignitary protection. So we're talking about environments where there's people all around you. So what they're doing this position for is they're in a battle space situation. They're in Africa, they're in the Middle East. They're not in the Walmart parking lot, okay? So they're using the gun, they bring it to high ready, and they bring the gun up next to their head like this, and this hand's in a fending position. And they always turn in the direction of the gun, so if they do see something, they can apply the gun to the threat. They don't turn away from the gun, because you can see now I'd have to bring it around. But he said it was done for very specific circumstances. Also keep in mind, as he told us, remember the rule, you never point the gun at anything you're not willing to shoot, kill, or destroy? Within their realm, that is not a rule. Because the protective details they're doing in these battle zones or these high-risk environments, when they turn, they're pointing their gun at everybody out there until they determine they're not a threat. Now, you can take the attitude that, well, you know, if I'm in the shopping mall parking lot and that's happening to me, then I'm going to consider everybody a threat out there. Okay, sounds good, you know, on the training range. I want to see you stand in front of the judge in the county court and explain to him, well, Your Honor, I turned around and I pointed my gun at everybody out there, all the screaming women and children, because I just didn't know who a threat was. Do that for me, Sparky, and let me know how that works for you. Can't do that stuff domestically, team. You can't do it. Look at the videos just recently of police doing fairly benign things, like trying to do the armbar on the black female down in Texas. To me, that was like a non-event. You know how many times I did stuff like that? We just didn't have cell phone cameras. That was really nothing. Can you imagine the video of you in the shopping mall parking lot with people running around you and you're going, really, dude? Do you think you can do that? And keep in mind, the downside of the technique is when you come around, the gun has to come down. What goes up goes down, and what direction are you pointing it in? Do you really think you can do that domestically just because it looks neat? The instructor that explained this to us said, this is not for this type of use, didn't he, Kathleen? You were there. You know, he explained it to us. He said, this is not for you guys. That's the reason I like to tuck my gun in here, and when I have you turn around, the gun's pointed downward, and if you need it, you can lift up. You got to bring the gun down. Here, I don't have to lift the gun up, do I? I could put it in the holster. I would feel much more comfortable standing in front of a judge explaining when I turned that I had my gun here than I turned and I had my gun here. Because you're not going to turn around like this and not bring the gun down. You're not going to leave it up next to your head. I can just guarantee it. So understand that this high position is for a very specific set of tasks. High-risk environments, war zones, things like that. And again, it's not new, as you saw in the picture from Massayu. Also, back when I was in SWAT, when I was at HK, we're using MP5s. We were taught to put our muzzles up, and we rest our forearms against the stock. And this is how we would, do things like that. You can't always just drop your gun on a sling. Why? Because if somebody grabs it, they'll turn you into a frisbee. Ask me how I know. Yeah. Fortunately, it was in a training environment, but I slung a shotgun, and I had an instructor grab a hold of me and just sling me around. So sometimes you've got to control the weapon. Sometimes it's a good idea to have it high. Sometimes it's a good idea to have it low. If you're in a helicopter, you probably want to have it low. If you're in a rubber boat, you probably want to have it high. But you just spent domestically, I think you're better off put that gun down than having it up like that. So does everybody understand the difference of some of these things? Because they are truly unique and original, they take on a whole life of their own, but they don't necessarily need to be in your skill sets. Any questions about that? We good on it? Okay, outstanding. Let's move on.